Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Everybody hear me okay? Yep. What's the one thing that nobody owns but everybody benefits from?
Air.
The internet. And air. And air. There's a lot of talk about blockchain, all the use cases and potential use cases, and if you've been to a bunch of conferences and you're wondering, how do I actually do this in my business? I'm a business person. This is what I've learned about doing these things, and as a business person who's also a software engineer, I try to relate to the business person's level of understanding of what it would take to sell this internally. This presentation is geared for you and how to do that, okay? So how many of you here want to try to influence the adoption of blockchain in your company? Raise your hand, but don't know how to do it, okay? So I got the right audience, perfect. We only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to go through this fairly fast, and then I want to leave a lot of time to interact with you at the end, okay? Is that agreeable with everybody? Okay. This is what we're going to do in 20 minutes. You're going to find out what are blockchains and smart contracts from a non-technical perspective, the business end of this. You're going to learn about the differences and how to consider what type you might use. What are the main benefits? Business benefits. How can you apply a blockchain to a business process that exists in your company today? And then use case identification selection, again, from a non-technical perspective. And then implementing and measuring that, and how you actually go about suggesting in your company to launch a pilot when you're not even a technical blockchain person. And actually, you have more influence in that than what you think, especially finance people. How many finance people got there? Anybody? A couple? Good. And then I got a few bonus things for you at the end, some selling points, some things, messaging to senior management that also doesn't know anything about blockchain. So what we're going to do is try to get you to where you can talk to those things. This is business language, not technical, okay? Blockchain is a technology that helps you do things better in the business world. There's two types, public and private. You've probably seen a lot of that here, and we'll go to that in the next slide. But permission blockchains are most appropriate for business-to-business applications, but not always. So B2B is a good slam dunk for that. B2C, you can consider something else. Well, here's the most important thing. If you don't remember anything about this presentation today, remember this last bullet. Blockchain is a team sport, which means that it's best suited where you have trusted people that are already doing business under a physical paper contract, but that process is extremely manual and painful within your company, and you have a lot of overhead associated with it. Okay? That's where you really benefit from blockchain in your business. I'll try to stand off to the side so if you all want to take pictures of the slides. And also in the end, there's a LinkedIn invitation with a QR code. Hit it with your phone, and if you don't get this or want it at the end, I'll be happy to email it to anybody who wants it. Okay? What are smart contracts? They're a manifestation of your physical paper negotiations turned into computer code, and they execute terms, conditions, and pricing. Stuff you all are all familiar with, okay? They're the basis by which transactional endorsement rules are agreed between you and your counterparty. So they're the blockchain rules for you, okay? And then they can be installed on different channels within the blockchain. So if you're sitting there going, man, how do I get on the same network with all my competitors, all my suppliers, all their suppliers, some of them we have in common, that's like an antitrust issue waiting to happen, right? With blockchain, you can segment those smart contracts and transactions between what's called channels and private data. And you can actually prove antitrust compliance with every single transaction you submit, okay? That's a huge benefit. Here's the main differences. Public blockchains on the left, business blockchains on the right. We're focused on what you all are trying to do in business over here, which means you already know the entities in which you're doing business with. They're trusted because you have a contract with them. They don't always adhere to it, but smart contracts will help with that. There's no cryptocurrency mining. Private blockchains like Hyperchain Fabric that we demo in the oil and gas use case over there do not require mining. The consensus mechanisms don't require that. So if you have ESG goals in your company where you're trying to watch your carbon footprint, this is a huge selling point to your management, so don't forget this point, okay? In most cases, B2B applications with known participants is a good application for business blockchain, or private permission. Hyperledger Fabric is usually the poster child for a private network, or permission network. Main benefits. This is another key point. This is the second thing you remember is the first bullet on the slide. Blockchain's a team sport is the first one. The second one is, if you're in business transactions where you have to get in spreadsheets, cycle data, do reporting for finance, and cobble it all together, and then somebody changes the projection, you got to start all over again, that's not good, right? And closing time for finance is huge. Your month-end close, quarter-end close, annual close, I mean, blockchain accelerates that at hyperspeed. So if you're doing business on disparate systems with your counterparties, you're all email spreadsheets, web portals, and you got a bunch of them and all IT overhead associated with that, this takes a lot of that friction away. That's the second main selling point. You're all on the same network. If you ever want to see a demonstration of how that works, come over and see me next door and I'll set up the network and you can transact on it yourself. Every transaction is self-auditing. How many people have dealt with audits in your company? Raise your hand. Right? Okay. It's a pain. Why would you deal with that when every transaction already has this rules coded in it and you can prove it just by looking at the transaction hash? Status of every transaction is known in real time to the people who are authorized to see it. Invoice pending, invoice paid, invoice closed, any status you want to assign to it, everybody can see it, it's allowed to see it. You never have to pick up the phone to call someone, you never have to figure out, what's accounts payable doing, accounts receivable, it's known in real time. Smart contracts can mimic the effects of natural language contracts to streamline processes. If you saw clauses of presentation, it was a perfect example of that. In fact, we implement clause, or we're going to in our Hyperchain network. How do you identify use cases? You're a non-technical professional and you're going, man, I want to do blockchain in my company, I need to convince my CEO, CIO, CFO, whatever, and this is how we do it, okay? These are the step-by-step instructions. You identify what's got a lot of pain associated with it and you have a counterpart, okay? There's a low degree of trust or you have a lot of audit around it. You got contract terms that are repeatable and it's highly manual, you got spreadsheets, web portals, and you have attributes that can easily be measured, right? How many late deliveries did you make? So on. You can practically invent your own metrics around this. But the main thing is that you take your existing processes today and you just convert your rules into computer code to execute to this. Everybody good on identification? We can revisit this in a minute. I know I'm going fast, but we'll follow up with questions. So how do you select? So you've identified a bunch of candidates. You go, how do I select which one I want to do first? Okay. Well, the first thing is you want to do the one that has the fastest time to value, right? You don't want to you're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time here. That's really the analogy that's best suited to this. You don't want to cause a bunch of organizational change management havoc in your company. So we're going to start small and draw the circles bigger as we go. We want to reduce transactional overhead in a meaningful way. That doesn't mean firing people or laying them off. It just means redeploying them if you want to better value-adding activities besides chasing invoices down on the telephone. You want to decrease the finance closing cycle time. Who wants to be a hero or heroine in your finance department or your CFO because you can do this? You're proposing this. This is what you want to do. And there's a low cost to implement proof of concepts and be scaled into production easily. So don't pick the most complicated business process you have. Pick the least complicated one with the most pain points associated with it. That's a great place to start. So how do you implement and measure? How do you launch a blockchain pilot? Well, you think big and you start small, which is low cost, low risk. You work with a company like Hyperchain Labs that's experienced in the type of blockchain network implementation you want to choose. Make sure that you develop a hypothesis first of what you think you can do with blockchain. Now, typically what I do is I say, if you have a manual business process that involves counterparties, I think I can take 50% of your transactional overhead off the top of that. Straight across the board. That's a big claim. Now let's go prove it. Whatever you decide your metric has to be, develop the hypothesis, write it down, develop the pass-fail criteria, and then recruit a willing counterparty in your trusted, your network of counterparties that wants to join your blockchain team sport team, okay? Known as a consortium or consortia if there's multiples. And then if that works, you're deploying the network and you're measuring the result. If it works, scale it. If it doesn't work, fail it and move on. Take the failure battle. Hey, you tried, it didn't work, and move on. Blockchain doesn't solve everything. There's some blockchain myths out there. Hey, let's get rid of the legal department. I don't think so. The legal department is the input to the smart contract. Blockchain can make all business processes better. It can make most better, but ones with the criteria I described earlier, where you have counterparties, a lot of manual pain points, right? And everything's running smooth. Blockchain contained within the four walls of a single company is not a valid use case. If there's not a counterparty on the other side of it, use the database. Make sense? We can automate our entire supply chain function with blockchain. Well, not quite. You still need your supply chain professionals to go out and negotiate the pricing terms and conditions that you're actually going to put in the smart contract. So you're not getting rid of people. You're just doing the downstream of what they output better. Some regulatory considerations. Permission blockchain networks don't use cryptocurrency. We can tie it into the existing financial system today and not disrupt your internal financial processes. Your banking relationships, treasury, stuff like that. There are all kinds of ways to do this. There are no increased carbon footprint risk or ESG. Everyone know what ESG stands for? Environmental, social, and governance. Most publicly traded companies will have these goals. How many people work for a publicly traded company? Raise your hand. Couple? You'll have ESG goals if you look at your investor page. If you work for a private company and you're worried about carbon footprint, same thing. So if you're on a private permission blockchain, that's a good selling point to your management. Hey, we're not going to increase our carbon footprint. If that's important to you. The reason why is because the federal government said, hey, Facebook, Libra, we don't want you to do this. And you hear these Congress say in the hearings, we really love the technology underlying it, we just don't trust them with Libra, right?
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
The ESG risk, is that usually as a 10K filing or?
Oh yeah.
Corporate?
Yeah, it is. This is an actual screenshot of the produced water hauling network that we have running over there. You can do produced water hauling. This and its associated contracts are in use today. The participants in this network are the lease operator or the oil company, the trucking company doing the hauling for them, and the disposal well operator. That smart contract process takes exactly 3 people to execute end-to-end. The field operator, the trucking company, and finance. That's it. And actually, if you count supply chain setting up the contract originally, but in production, 3 people. No chasing email, phone calls. So what'd you learn today? Very quickly, you learned what blockchain smart contracts are, the different types, some of the benefits, use case identification, selection, how to develop metrics criteria, and then you learned about some myths and regulatory considerations, and the blockchain is actually ready to be used today inside your business. You just have to be able to make the step and convince your management that it's worth doing. And again, referring back to the physical pain of the processes that are most painful for your overhead. There's the QR code if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn. We'll move some of these chairs out of the way so you don't skew your camera. Somebody can just do it to us. I just want to make sure this thing actually works from a distance. I take connections on LinkedIn. If you do connect with me on LinkedIn or send an invitation, please mention that we met here at this conference. That way I'll know who you are. Anybody have any luck with the QR code yet?
Yeah, I got it.
It worked?
Yep.
My goodness. It's the first time I've applied this technology in a slide. We do mobile apps too that tie into blockchain. So your corporate, if you got iPhones in your corporate, we have a mobile app that accompanies that. You can fire it up and it connects, so you don't need to be tied to a PC. In fact, in that truck ticketing use case, the truckers aren't going to carry around a PC to go at the top of the tank, right? They need just got to be mobility solutions. So that's included. So follow us on Twitter. If you need help convincing your management, getting started, reach out. If you need advice, reach out. Happy to help. So, with that, I think I'm not going to say we don't have time for questions because I promised we did. So I'm going to stop there. Make sure I don't have anything else. Attached to this slideshow, there's some resources for you guys when you get this presentation, be able to hit those links, okay? All right, questions? I know we went through a lot fast.
What if a VP identifies a specific use case and emails you for a conversation?
If that happens, the first thing you need to do is call me. No. The first thing you need to do is refer to this slide deck and go through the criteria and ask yourself, is what he's asking for match this use case criteria? And if he comes to you and says, I want to put blockchain in our finance department, what's your response to him going to be?
No.
And why?
I think it's a bad idea.
Because blockchain within four walls of a company
It's
is,
not efficient.
because blockchain is a team sport. You got a counterpart, right? See, you guys are quick learners. Anybody else? Did this meet the needs of what you thought it was going to be? Was non-technical something you could learn from? A starting point?
How do you recommend proceeding with contributing to a shared data model for a distributed ledger transaction database? Like, how do you get the parties to understand data models and how to...
That's a great question. When I said recruit a willing counterparty, part of that recruitment process is agreeing on the governance of how you're going to run the blockchain. And by governance, what you talk about is what common data models are you going to use. Now, some industries have specific data models that are standardized to that industry. The governance policy isn't a bunch of legal work. It's if you have 4 companies in there, what is the governance going to say about how many of them have to actually validate the transaction to make a commit to the shared ledger? And if the consortium says there's 4 of us, we're going to go majority, so that's 3 out of 4, that's the rules, that's the governance you agree to. Right? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
The common data model is really important because really what you're doing is you're standardizing all of your business processes with your suppliers. How many of you have suppliers or other relationships in your counterparties that use completely different processes than you, and you're like putting a round peg into a square hole? I mean, it happens every day. With this, you're all in the same network. It's all agreed to in advance. Every interface you click through, they're clicking through the same data model. Make sense? If a telephone number is the country code plus the area code plus the 10-digit, everyone's going to match that data model. That's the example.
If you want to make a call.
One last question.
If I do want to tie some of this to my financial system, say on my supply chain as it moves through different stages, I want to pay out POs.
Yep.
Easy links to whether I'm on QuickBooks or SAP.
Yeah, well, if you saw clause, you can tie to QuickBooks. There are APIs in the SAP you can do. Eventually, permission blockchain and quantum ledgers will completely redo how we think ERP, but there will be an intermediate 5 years or so where you're probably still going to have to talk to your existing ERP system. So it's a great question.
Yeah, I remember last year, or was it, I can't remember what it was actually, but it was one of our summits, Sophia TX, if you guys ever heard of those guys.
2-3 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, they were doing it, supply chain, really successful. But what they ended up doing was also putting up a web portal for people that weren't compliant, tying to the finance systems, so they could just go and transact and be part of the chain there instead they had to be. So you can still complete it and work with your partner.
Yes.
Which is cool.
This concept here, the permission blockchain and a consortium relationship between you and a counterparty or multiple counterparties, it doesn't just have to be you and your counterparties because you don't want to have the 500 blockchains network. Have an industry, like we're building ag chain right now, so anyone in the ag industry can get on there, and because you can separate smart contracts with different parties, it's like we don't have 500 internets, right? We have one.
We have to end it, sorry. Thank you so much. Round of applause, please.